We've got a lot to cover tonight, but we're going to get started with Ukraine. It has been forgotten in the news, not many people talking about Ukraine. And apparently, Ukraine is now being told to give up, that the U.S. isn't interested anymore, and they need to look into negotiating with Russia. Yes, this is according to NBC News. Here is the report. U.S. and European officials have begun quietly talking to the Ukrainian government about what possible peace negotiations with Russia might entail to end the war, according to one current senior U.S. official and one former senior U.S. official. Goes on to say the conversations have included very broad outlines of what Ukraine might need to give up to reach a deal, the officials said. Some of the talks, which officials describe as delicate, took place last month during a meeting of representatives from more than 50 nations supporting Ukraine, including NATO members known as the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, the officials said. They began amid concerns among U.S. and European officials that the war has reached a stalemate and about the ability to continue providing aid to Ukraine. Biden administration officials also are worried that Ukraine is running out of forces while Russia has a seemingly endless supply. Ukraine is also struggling with recruiting and has recently seen public protests about some of President Volodymyr Zelensky's open-ended conscription requirements. So we're now telling Ukraine to do the very thing that many of us were calling for from the very beginning. It's been a year and a half, thousands of people killed. And many knew that the outcome would be this, that Russia would get what Russia wanted, which was the Donbass and to create a land bridge to Crimea. Maybe Russia had some goals to get more of the land. Maybe there was the thinking that they would go all the way to Kiev and that they would take everything up to about Kiev. But they certainly reached the first round of their goal, which was to take Donbass and the land bridge, create a land bridge to Crimea. So Russia accomplished their goals. Ukraine ended up with a lot of people dead. And now the U.S. is saying, okay, we're going to go ahead and tell you to negotiate for peace. This is after the United States has said to Ukraine over and over and over again, we are with you to the end, that there is we are going to stay with this until Russia's defeated. We're going to stick with Ukraine until all of the land is taken back by Ukraine. Now, I was all for peace, so I'm not saying that that's the way to go. I want to make that clear. I am for this. This is ultimately a good thing. Ukraine should negotiate with Russia, should probably give up the land that's already been that Russia's already been able to capture, and move on. They should just move on and try to make peace with their big neighbor that's right next to them. Russia's not going anywhere, and Ukraine isn't either. So this is the best thing for Ukraine, but it is frustrating and really infuriating and devastating in a lot of ways that it took this long and this many lives to get to this point. Countless lives lost for no reason than to get to this point, the point that we could have gotten to at the very beginning. And now what? Now you've got a defeated Ukraine. They've been lied to by the United States government. So the United States government sitting there and saying to them, giving Zelensky standing ovation, saying, we're with you to the very end. They've been lied to by the U.S. government. So now we've lost faith. People have lost their faith in the United States. We look like idiots around the world. They're saying, oh, well, we have to do this because we've got to show China. What did we show China exactly by doing this? What was the goal was to show China our strength. Now that we're telling Ukraine, we're not willing to back you anymore. This is a stalemate. You guys are just running out of forces, and we're not willing to come in and actually fight troops on the ground. So what exactly did we show? The whole point was show China our strength, show them that we cannot be defeated. And yet in a year and a half, we've been defeated. Ukraine has been defeated with the United States prodding and urging, and they've made absolutely no progress. This is the end result is the exact same. So this is infuriating that the United States would lose that people are definitely going to be losing faith in the United States. Ukrainians, you could bet, are going to be pissed off. They're not going to look at the United States as allies and friends after they're forced to quickly negotiate a peace deal with Russia. A year and a half, that's not a long war. It's good. I'm glad that this is ending. I'm glad that we're getting to this point. I'm glad that U.S. officials have finally pulled their heads out and they're actually now telling Ukraine it's time to go for peace. This is a good thing, but it is infuriating. It's cruel, is what it is. It's cruel to have done this to Ukraine, to have led them on in the way that the United States government led them on, to make them believe that we would have their back, that all the NATO countries would have their back. The writing was on the wall from the beginning. Many of us knew the United States absolutely, and NATO did not have Ukraine's back. They weren't willing to let Ukraine into NATO. Ukraine had been asking for a decade, can we be in NATO? Can we be in NATO? And the answer was always no, you cannot be in NATO. The minute Finland and Sweden say, can we be in NATO? They're inaugurated in just right away. Sure, of course, right now you can join NATO. What a slap in the face to Ukraine. The writing should have been on the wall right from the beginning. And the writing was on the wall for many to see. There was never going to be any other outcome than this outcome. And now we have cruelly strung people along, cruelly I have now left behind countless families who are mourning the loss of their loved ones in Ukraine, looking at the United States saying, we trusted you. You said that you would have our back. You said defeating Russia was your number one priority. We were the ones on the battlefield, sacrificing our lives, and you were giving us money. That was nice. Money and some weapons. But we were sacrificing our lives. And now, after a year and a half, because you've got a shinier new war to go off and fight, a war that you are more committed to, a country you're more committed to. And so now, another country, by the way, that's also not in NATO, Israel's not in NATO. We have no defense agreement with Israel. We have no it's unclear exactly how Israel is our greatest ally when they've never provided a single troop for any of the combat missions the United States has been in, or any of the wars the United States, or any of the invasions, or any sort of combat. Israel has not contributed any troops. They don't give us weaponry. They say, well, we give you some surveillance, some intelligence. I don't know what that's worth when you look at what's going on now. And so now there's a new war, not even a NATO ally, and Ukraine is being left behind in the dust. Again, this is the right move. They need to be negotiating peace. It would be tragic for this war to continue on anymore, with more lives lost and just continuing to march down the road. That is obviously going to end where it's going to end right now. But this is just so absolutely crushing and infuriating that we would lead these people down this path, that we would force them to sacrifice themselves and their children, their husbands, their fathers, their loved ones. Sickening that we marched them down this path. And that so many people championed it, that so many people today, who, by the way, are the same very people marching in the streets calling for a ceasefire with Israel and Gaza, were the very people championing Ukraine on, saying, go for it. We're not willing to go fight. We're not sending our kids. But you go ahead, you do it. Fight Russia for us. Fight, fight, fight. And many of us said, no, we need to get to a peace agreement, a ceasefire immediately. And we were ridiculed. Many of us were ridiculed, saying, how dare you? How dare you tell Ukraine to negotiate for peace and to give up some land that they weren't even in control of. They weren't even in control of the land. The land had been in a civil war with them for the last decade. The people in the Donbass were fighting against Ukraine. They weren't identifying with Ukraine. They weren't receiving any of the government services. Many of them were receiving passports and documentation from Russia in order to get around the world because they weren't working with the government of Ukraine. So the situation, it was very clear that part of the country in Ukraine didn't really want to be with Ukraine. They were clearly fighting for either their own independence or they were fighting to be with Russia. They were fighting fiercely, those fighters in the Donbass. They were doing their best. They were holding their own, but they exhausted. They got to a point where they couldn't do it anymore, and they were begging Russia to come in and save us, come in and help us out. They were down on their backs, and essentially Russia did come in. For Russia's own, of course, reasons. No country is going to just rush in and help out if they don't have their own geopolitical strategic reasons for doing so, and Russia had some. And so it was a good excuse to go and help the people in Donbass, the fighters in Donbass who were trying to get towards independence, and this is the result. And of course this was the result, because how was Ukraine going to recapture Donbass when they couldn't even get them when it was a civil war? When it was a civil war without the force of a nuclear power, superpower like Russia, they couldn't control Donbass. So what made anybody think they were suddenly going to control Donbass once a nuclear superpower jumped in on behalf of that region? It was never going to happen. So this was sickening. The outcome was expected. Many of us could see this coming, and now it's a stain on the good name or the goodwill of America, which has deteriorated rapidly over the last several decades. Left Ukraine in shambles, and demoralized and defeated. I mean, this is just a terrible, terrible thing. So Zelensky, he's desperate. He's still desperate to keep fighting the war. He doesn't want to give up. He's asking for help, and he believes that if Trump becomes president, that maybe Trump will help him out. So during a Meet the Press interview, Zelensky invited Trump to Ukraine to see the war for himself in hopes that he'd offer more support if he becomes president. Watch this.
President Zelensky, former President Trump, who is the GOP frontrunner, has said that if he is reelected, he could end this war in 24 hours. What is your reaction and message to former President Trump about that?
Former President Trump said that about 24 hours that he can manage it and finish the war. For me, what can I say? So he's very welcome, first of all. President Biden was here, and I think he understood some details, which you can understand only being here. So I invite President Trump, if he can come here, I will need 24 minutes. Yes, 24 minutes, not more. Пояснити, yes, not more, 24 minutes to explain President Trump that he can't manage this war. He can't bring peace because of the Putin. But always we have if he is not trying and if he is not ready to give our territory for this terrible man, for the Putin. If you are not ready to give it, if you are not ready to give our independence, he can't manage it. Yes. So he's very welcome.
He's welcome to come to Ukraine. Other presidential candidates have obviously come to Ukraine as well. Have you had any contact with former President Trump since he left office, President Zelensky?
No. That's why he's very welcome to repeat our tradition, which was when he was the president.
Do you think he would have Ukraine's back if he were to be reelected?
I don't know. I don't know. I hope that it depends not only on presidents institutionally. I think it depends on the opinion of Americans, of your society. I think that is most important. I think it's important in the United States and EU, the attitude of just ordinary people. It's their support, it's their money. It's depends on them.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about.
So just absolutely devastating to see that. And he sounded like he was struggling. When I'd seen him speaking to Congress or his various different tours that he was doing throughout the last year and a half, his English seemed to be a little bit better. And I don't know if he's struggling because he's nervous, he's upset, he's feeling flustered and frustrated, but it is heartbreaking to see. It genuinely is. I was certainly not, I wasn't rooting for either side except for peace. Definitely wanted to see fewer dead people in this, knowing that the outcome was not going to be any different. And it is heartbreaking that Zelensky there has been lied to by the U.S. empire, telling him that we were going to have his back, and now he's got a bunch of dead Ukrainians to bury and devastated families. And the same for the Russians. They went in, I mean, but, this was their choice to go in and do an invasion at the time that they chose to do it for whatever their reasons were. And maybe you feel like their reasons were justified or maybe not, but it doesn't matter either way. There are dead Russians as well. And the entire thing is extremely tragic. We should have been pushing Ukraine towards a peace agreement from the very beginning and just saying, you are not going to win this war. This is not going to be good, and the outcome isn't going to be good, so it's time to come to a peace agreement. But does the U.S. learn the lesson? Here we are thinking this makes us look mighty, right? Like we have to arm Ukraine because we have to fight Russia to show China that we are mighty. We are a mighty force to be reckoned with. Of course, Ukraine is making us look like fools and looking like we're weak and we're unable to actually defeat a superpower. This is a win for Russia. Let's face it, that is what it is. This is a win for Russia. So what does the U.S. do? Oh, the U.S. wants to do the same thing to Taiwan. Now, you would think that Taiwan would actually look at this situation in Ukraine and say, no, thanks, we're out of here. We're just going to have to make some peace agreements with China. We're not going to go down that same path and sacrifice lives only to, in the end up in the same position where we were in to begin with, which is China's our neighbor. They're right here. And it would be devastating to not have a friendship with them and a trade agreement with them and to continue some sort of friendly relations when they are our neighbor right here. So the U.S. apparently doesn't care, still trying to show it to China, stick it to Russia and stick it to China and show them we're so strong. According to the BBC, the U.S. is quietly arming Taiwan to the teeth. Yeah. Joe Biden recently signed off on an $80 million grant to Taiwan for the purchase of American military equipment. This is a grant. This means taxpayer dollars. It's a gift. It's not a loan. We're giving them $80 million of our money. So the U.S. is emphasizing the desperate need to improve our military capacity. It is sending a clear message of strategic clarity to Beijing that we stand together, says Wang Tingyu, a ruling party legislator with close ties to Taiwan's president, Tsai Ing-wen, and to U.S. congressional chiefs. He says the $80 million is the tip of what could be a very large iceberg, and notes that in July, President Biden used discretionary powers to approve the sale of military services and equipment worth $500 million to Taiwan. Mr. Wang says Taiwan is preparing to send 2 battalions of ground troops to the U.S. for training, the first time this happened since the 1970s. But the key is the money. The beginning of what he says could be up to $10 billion over the next 5 years. So we don't learn any lessons, and clearly neither do these other countries. I mean, why would Taiwan now turn and rely, again, not a NATO country, we have no agreement with Taiwan, and they're not going to be let into NATO. Ukraine has a better shot at being let into NATO than Taiwan, that is for sure. Ukraine has a better shot at it than Taiwan. So you'd think Taiwan would look at what's going on in Ukraine and say, actually, you know what, never mind. Because we're not really your priority. The American people are not going to be sending troops to go and defend Taiwan against China. You know that's not going to be the case. Israel, that's different. The U.S. may send troops. I believe we have troops, ground troops, special forces actually on the ground in Israel at the moment. We've got a submarine on its way, a nuclear sub, and we've got the aircraft carriers. We've got thousands of troops now actually in the Middle East waiting to pounce if Israel says, pounce, we need you. That was not happening so much for Ukraine. Certainly won't happen for Taiwan. Sure, we have troops in the region. Of course, we have troops in the Southern Pacific. Of course, we have troops throughout Europe. But we weren't really going in to actually ramp up to potentially battle Russia, and we certainly won't be going in to battle China. So you think that Taiwan would actually catch a clue on the way things have happened with Ukraine and say, never mind, we don't trust you. But listen, there's a lot of money in war. There's a lot of money to be made. And ultimately, just like with COVID, right? Just like with COVID, they said, everybody, if you do X, Y, Z, we will end the pandemic. We will stop the spread. When they said, everybody get the vaccine and this will stop the spread and we'll end the pandemic if everybody just gets it. And they even tried to mandate it, saying everybody must for the good of the country. This is what needs to happen. And in the end, people still got COVID. The vaccine does not stop the spread. That is well known now, even though that was heavily debated. Saying, well, you gave it the booster. Okay, now the 4th shot. Oh, the 5th shot will do it. None of them did it. You can still get COVID after you've had the vaccine. The only thing that happened with that was that the vaccine makers got rich. There was an industry of people who got really, really, really wealthy. And that's what happens in war. The outcome is no different. The outcome is the same. But a group of people get really rich. And so with Ukraine, the outcome, like the pandemic, the same thing. The outcome's the same, but there's some really rich people now And there's a lot of other wealthy people looking and eyeing Ukraine saying, we're ready to swoop in and start rebuilding the areas we can rebuild. And there's going to be money there. There's going to be loans to Ukraine, and Ukraine's going to be in debt. So not only did we wreck their country, the outcome's no different. Russia still secured the land that Russia intended to secure. They've got dead Ukrainians who are being mourned by the entire country and family members, mothers crying, wives crying, children crying. You've got all of that. And now they're going to be in debt. So not only did they lose their lives for us to battle Russia, but now they're going to be in debt to U.S. companies who are going to come in and try to rebuild and make a bunch of money off of Ukraine. And you take advantage of the fact it's a very corrupt country. So there's a lot of money laundering that could happen there. You'd think that Taiwan would learn. You think that America would learn. You'd think Americans would learn, and that many Americans would actually have taken to the streets calling for a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, calling for a peace agreement, much like what we're seeing in the streets now for Palestine. But we just did not see that. And in the end, unfortunately, Ukraine pays the price. And this is just a very, very cruel, heartless, terrible outcome for Ukraine, and a stain, again, on the American reputation, whatever's left of it anyway. All right, guys, I want to introduce you to the Wellness Company, and specifically their medical emergency kit. The Wellness Company is committed to supporting you through whatever the next thing is. Knock on wood, let's hope it's not another pandemic. Although I did see that Tedros with the WHO said another pandemic is coming. So, gear up, everybody. So the Wellness Company is going to help you gear up, because you got doctors like Peter McCullough, Dr. Peter McCullough, and you remember him. He was a big, really champion throughout the pandemic. He started the Wellness Company to build a parallel healthcare system and bring about change in an otherwise corrupt system. And part of that change is helping you take control of your health. And many people don't trust healthcare. In fact, over 40% of Americans say that they would avoid a doctor or a hospital unless it was a catastrophic situation. And that's where the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit comes in. You'll get 8 potentially life-saving medications for you to keep on hand in times of need. That includes natural disasters, supply chain shortages, medical emergencies, or an apocalyptic situation. You can rest easy knowing that you have emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and antiparasitics on hand to keep you and your family safe. And if you're thinking, well, I'm not a doctor, how would I know what to take? Well, the Wellness Company doctors have you covered, because the kit includes a guidebook detailing how, when, and the dosing for each of the medications. So if you're like me and you like to be prepared for the unexpected, go to twc.health/Kim. That link is down below. It's kind of difficult to remember, twc.health/Kim, and use code Kim to save 15% off at checkout. That's twc.health/Kim, code Kim for 15% off.